Welcome to chapter 29, the subjunctive mood. Continued. Here in this chapter, we're going to learn the imperfect subjunctive, the present and imperfect subjunctive of the verb to be and its related verb to be able, as well as a new clause, the result clause. Let's take a look and see exactly what the imperfect subjunctive is. It's obviously, perhaps not obviously, it refers to the subjunctive in the past tense. In chapter 28, we learned the subjunctive in the present tense, and now we're going to learn it in the simple past, or what we call the imperfect. We are going to learn the present perfect and the pluperfect subjunctive. There's no future subjunctive. So for right now, you've learned the present subjunctive in chapter 28. This is the imperfect subjunctive. And for all the conjugations, it is remarkably easy to conjugate the imperfect subjunctive, even though it's a little peculiar. You put your personal endings right on the second principal part. Whether it's active or passive, it doesn't matter. Let's take a look at some of these. Let's refresh our minds on what the active or passive endings are. In the active, they are O or M, S, T, MUS, TIS, and then NT. And the passive is R, RIS, TOR, MOR, MINI, NTOR, RIS, TOR, MOR, MINI, NTOR. So these are your active and your passive endings, and yes, to repeat, you add them right on the end of the second principal part. Let's take a look at these for each conjugation. Amo, amare, amawi, amatum. For the active voice, you are just going to put it amar em, amar es, amar et. And see, I've just included it here. I've put the dash in between so you can see it truly is your personal ending right on that second principal part. You would not write it with a dash. I've only used it here for this one example. Amare mus, amaritis, amarent. And in the passive voice, amarer, amareris, amaretor, amaremor, amaremini, amarentor. It's that simple. And we do the same thing for the second conjugation. Habeo, habere, habui, habitum. And here are the forms there. Haberem, haberes, haberet, haberemus, haberetus, haberent. And in the passive, haberer, habereris, haberetur, haberemor, haberemini, haberentor. And I'm going through this in each one of these just to show you how remarkably consistent the imperfect subjunctive is in its formation. Duco, ducere, we just put the active endings right on that second principal part. And the same way with the passive. We put the passive endings on that second principal part. You want to go with the third IO? For sure. Third IO, capio, capere, caperem, caperes, caperet, caperemus, caperetus, caperent. And the passive endings go on there as well. It looks a little odd, doesn't it, to see those endings right on the second principal part, but here it is, and with the fourth conjugation, audio, audire, audirem, audires, audiret, audiremus, audiretus, audirent. And the passive, audirerer, audireris, audiretor, audiremor, audiremini, audirentor. It's odd to say. So, let's change gears. That's your standard imperfect subjunctive. Now let's look at sum ss, your subjunctive of sum and possum. Sum esse fui futurum, in your present subjunctive, is sim, sis, sit, simus, situs, sint. And the imperfect subjunctive is exactly as I told you just before, right on the second principal part. You put those endings. Esse, what's the second principal part? Esse, essem, esses, esset, essemus, essetus, essent. There is no passive of the verb to be, so this is it. This is what you've learned here. Two forms. Now, the possum, okay, the possum is going to be just like it. Whereas sim, sis, sit in the present subjunctive, possim, possis, possit, possimus, possitus, possunt. Possint. I've got a typo. I've got a typo in my presentation. Okay, I'll edit that out. Ignore that. But here you are in the imperfect. It's incredibly, the imperfect subjunctive is incredibly consistent right across the board. Now, how are we going to use this imperfect subjunctive? Oftentimes, and the way we get introduced to it in Wheelock, chapter 29, is a result clause. A result clause is a subordinate clause. What are the three subjunctive we've learned so far? Jussive, hortatory, which are independent clauses. I mean, independent sentences. There's no clause within them. The whole sentence is the subjunctive verb. And then we've learned the purpose clause. That is introduced by ut or ne. And now we're learning the result clause. And so get us back to this slide right here. It is a subordinate clause. You are going to have a main verb that introduces the result clause, which carries the subjunctive. It shows, well, oddly enough, the result. And it is introduced by ut or ut known, not ne. So if you have a clause and you're wondering, oh my goodness, is this purpose or is it result? Purpose is ne, result is ut, and the word no in there somewhere. And here's the kicker. Here's the clue for a result clause. It has a word that hints at the clause. Words, and what I mean by that is this right here. Words that indicate a result clause. Tam, ita, seek. These are all forms of so. Or tantus, an adjective that means so great. And please note, as I say at the bottom, that there are other forms of so in Latin, but in this book, the focus is on these three words. If you get into Latin, don't stress about it. Well, I learned that these are the only three. Absolutely not. These are the three in this book. These are the three in this introductory chapter for the result clause, but there are some others that can appear. Okay, the result clause. It's a subordinate clause. It's introduced by so or so much. How does it work? Let's take a look at it. A sentence is a result clause. This is my definition here, or my helpful hint. If after the main sentence and immediately after the that, you can introduce, under your breath, as a result. What do I mean? Let's take some examples. I ate so much pizza that, as a result, I had a stomachache. Notice it's that as a result. And notice the use of the word so in there. I had so much that, as a result, this happened. The movie was so good, ding, 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 clue, so is in there. That, as a result, I wanted to tell all my friends. I learned so much information in Latin that, as a result, everyone should take Latin. So notice it's the use of so in there, so great, so much, or just simply so. Here's some other examples. Tanta fecit ut urbem servavit. He did so many things, tanta, ut, that as a result, and the result isn't expressed, it's just in my head, he saved the city. He did such great things that, as a result, he saved the city. Here's another example. Tam strenue laborat ut multa perficiat. There's that tam. As soon as you see that tam, and you see that, oh, you look ahead and there's an ut in that sentence, lock. That's a lock for the result clause. He works so energetically that, as a result, he accomplishes many things. Again, emphasize, perhaps needlessly, that the as a result part isn't in there. It's just in the logic of the sentence. Some other examples. Tanta tempestas erat ut milites non urbem viderent. The storm was so great that, as a result, the soldiers didn't see the city. Notice the known in there, okay? The known urbem, it's not an A. The ut, soldiers non urbem viderent. Purpose versus result. Caesar sent legates so that he might seek peace. Okay? Notice it's the ut, so you have a clause here, but there's no Tom in there. There's no so in that sentence. So just looking at the format of the sentence, you can predict. You can, if you want to, hedge your bets here. There's no Tom, ita, or seek. That's a purpose clause. That's correct. Curebamos Tom. Oh, stop, Tom. That's it. I'm expecting, oh man, as soon as you see that Tom, there's so in there. I bet you this is going to be a result clause. And as soon as you hit that ut with the imperfect subjunctive, sold. We ran so swiftly that as a result, we did not fear anyone. There was not anybody who would fear us. Qui est Tom? Again, locked in there. Tom. So, that as a result, and there's your ut clause at the end. Notice you don't even have to translate the sentence to know whether it's purpose or result. And the last one, eo tempore Atheniensis tantum veritatem praestiterut ut decem plicem numerum hostium superarent. Tantum, so much truth that as a result, okay, result clause, ex urbe nunc discede, do not depart, ex urbe nunc discede, depart now, nay, so that not. Notice in this sentence you've got two strikes against the result clause. Number one, there's no Tom, ita, sic, or tantus in there, okay? And part two, it's introduced by a nay. So no indication this is a result. This is a purpose clause. Again, I'm just trying to get you into the mode to say, okay, how am I supposed to be able to tell the difference between a purpose clause and a result clause? Look at your visual clues. Look at the visual clues and it'll help. So, I do want to say one more thing about Tom, ita, and seek. How do you know which one to use? What's the difference? At this stage of the game, don't worry about it. Wheelock does provide an explanation, but again, at this part, they're all equivalent. And I've thought about this. In English, what's the difference in English between it's okay, it's fine, it's all right? How do we determine which one to say? You know what I mean? In other words, if you go to a restaurant and you order an appetizer and the server came in and said, hey, we're out of this, so we substituted that, what would you say? You'd say, oh, that's okay. Or you might say, that's all right. Or you might say, that's fine. What's the difference? In that case, what is the difference? I'm not sure I know how I determine which word to choose. And in some way, Tom, ita, seek, it's the same way. They are so close in meaning, I'm not sure even native speakers could determine a way to differentiate between them. You know what I mean? And so I don't want you to get lost in the minutia of what's the difference between Tom, ita, seek, because you are not going to be asked to generate it, between them. You're not going to have to choose between them at this point. And frankly, at this, or unless you continue on in Latin, you won't. In this class, you are not asked to distinguish between Tom, ita, seek at all. So don't stress that part. But it is curious. Again, we do these things in English too that I'm not sure I can explain in English. So there you go. That's chapter 29. Let me know if you have questions. Thanks.